I am praying that you will put into action the generosity that comes from your faith as you understand and experience all the things we have in Christ. Welcome to This Day Devo. My name is Pastor Guy, and today we read the entire book of Philemon. It is a book that is so short that it doesn't even have chapters. It's all just chapter 1. And what I read for you there was Philemon 6, verse 6 of one chapter. And this book is a really cool book. I preached on this a few years back about making a clean break from your past. And that's a big part of what's happening in this letter. It's understood that Paul is writing this again from prison in Rome. This is our last quote-unquote official letter from Paul. This is the 13th in order we've been working through since we started Romans. We've been doing the 13 letters of Paul. Philemon's the last one. Hebrews is coming up next, and we'll talk about that. That's up in the air about who wrote Hebrews. May have been Paul. But for Philemon's sake, let's kind of think about what this is. This is about putting generosity into action. This is about relationships. This is about extending grace. So this letter, Paul wrote this letter to a man named Philemon who was a wealthy believer who apparently had a runaway slave by the name of Onesimus, and because he ran away and potentially stole from him, he had every right to punish him harshly. But apparently, along the way, Onesimus met Paul in prison, and Paul led him to Christ. Onesimus showed Paul that his conversion was the real deal. He spent enough time with Paul that Paul knew that he was helpful to him. And he knew that with this newfound honest affection that he had for him, this love for him as a new believer, as a child of God, he knew that Onesimus could be just as useful to his master Philemon as he was to Paul. And so he wanted to send this letter back to Philemon with Onesimus to make sure that he is treated with the generosity of grace and faith, that he would extend this in a Christian way. Philemon probably lived in Colossae, which is the book of Colossians, or maybe Laodicea, which is a nearby city that Jesus reached out to in the 7 letters to the churches. We'll get to in Revelation. And so what does this tell us? I mean, this tells us that apparently he did follow through with this because at some point Onesimus, he shows up in church history, and it very much might be the same guy. So one of the things that we see is this beautiful example of how the gospel impacted Greco-Roman society by causing men in power like Philemon to extend grace to his bondservant or slave and help him, love him as a brother, because he was serving him well as they served the Lord together. So this is just a beautiful power and an invitation for us to understand that every relationship counts, that every person counts, is made in the image of God. And as a Christian, I am to extend generosity in how I love my brothers and sisters in the faith, and how I believe that every man, even a runaway slave, a runaway thief like Onesimus, can meet Christ and change his entire future because of what Jesus has done in his heart. So it's a beautiful story. And it also shows us that Paul's very demanding. We don't know anything about Paul and Philemon's relationship other than this letter, but it seems like Paul's like, hey, listen, I want you to know that I'm an old man. I have established authority in this relationship, and I could make this demand. But he knows that it's better to ask graciously, because Paul's heart is soft to the gospel. His heart is soft and tender, and he loves Philemon. And we've seen this all throughout the letters of Paul, where he's like, listen, I could be harsh, I could be blunt, but listen, I also love you. And so we get to see that truth and grace, hard truth and grace. And so he's asking. And so sometimes for us, we know what's right, we know what's wrong, we have the authority maybe in a certain area of our lives, a certain relationship in our lives, but it's better to approach us in a way that is graciously asking rather than demanding. And that lifts people up, and it's God honoring. And so I hope you enjoyed this really cool little letter called Philemon. And tomorrow we're jumping into the book of Hebrews, which we'll be in for I think around 2.5 weeks. We're going to be in Hebrews. It's our lengthiest letter we've had in a while. So God bless you. Have an awesome day. Thanks for stopping by. See ya. Down from heaven as the power of Christ